Rising, everybody. Happy Easter. Happy Easter weekend. Be sure to check out some Easter knowledge. I'm going to post both videos. Part one is Goddess Ishtar Inanna. And this video is going to be about the second coming of Christ, the sacred oil of Christ. Happy Easter weekend. I hope everybody is enjoying it safely, responsibly, enjoying this beautiful weather. The sacred oil of Christ as the second Christ coming, second coming of Christ. Within the brain is the cranium. There is the cerebrum, and in the cerebrum there is a secretion of brain fluid. This fluid is an oil, and in ancient times the fluid was called in Greek Krst. In other words, the sacred oil of the Christ. This is the story of the Christ within us all. As I always urge and prompt you guys to do your own research and homework, Krst was named after the Christ consciousness, K-R-S-T, and the ascended masters were considered the Krst ones, Christos. The journey of the oil of Christ. The oil originates from the claustrum, which is a thin, I believe that's where they get Santa Claus from. They said, "Is that you, Santa Claus?" The oil originates from the claustrum, which is a thin, irregular sheet of neurons that is attached to the underside of the neocortex in the center of the brain. It is suspected to be present in the brains of all mammals. The oil secreted by the cerebrum from the holy claustrum, also known as the Santa claustrum. It is said the story of Santa Claus comes from this inner science because Santa brings spiritual presence down your chimney from the cerebrum claustrum. It is then differentiated in the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, also known as Joseph and Mary. The pineal gland releases a masculine electrical portion, which is known as honey, and the pituitary gland releases the feminine magnetic portion, milk. This correlates to the sacred heavens in the holy portions of our brains, the land flowing in with milk and honey. The pineal gland is connected to the Pingala nerve. The pituitary gland is connected to the Ida nerve. These are known as the Kundalini and the Kunda buffer. These nerves extend all the way down the spine, which corresponds to the tree of life. The Pingala is your masculine divine component, and the Ida corresponds to your female divine component. Together, they reach you at the utmost balanced state of being. In order to become that balanced, strong, and harmonized self, we need to go within and demand to let our two components be healed and transformed in both parts of the brain. We are here to strengthen and harmonize you to your most loving and gentle being. A lot of deep breaths, because a lot of power, a lot of downloads, a lot of the information being channeled. The sacred fluid then pours down the spinal cord via the semilunar ganglion pneumogastric nerve. For all of you A and P buffs, they said anatomy and physiology. Till it reaches the sacral plexus right next to the sacrum, which are on the 6th to 10th vertebrae bones, the second bottommost fused vertebrae bones at the bottom of the spinal column. The sacral plexus holds very strong sexual energy that is beautiful energy, that when harvested can turn into an electrical energy that rises back up to the brain. The solar plexus and the sacral plexus are known as Bethlehem. The sacral plexus holds very strong sexual energy that is a beautiful energy that when harvested can turn into an electrical energy that rises back up to the brain. The solar plexus and sacral plexus area is known as Bethlehem. The germination of the seed. When the fluid oil arrives at the sacral plexus, it awaits for the germinating of the seed. Once a month, 12 times a year, there is a seed planted in the solar plexus, which is just above the When the fluid oil arrives at the sacral plexus, it waits for the germinating of the seed. Once a month, 12 times a year, there is a seed planted in the solar plexus, which is just above the sacral plexus in a manger in Bethlehem. The seed then germinates the oil, the fruit of the tree of life. And the seed then germinates the oil, the fruit of the tree of life, in the solar plexus, the manger. In other words, the Christ which is born in a manger in Bethlehem. The now sacred fluid then flows down the coccyx, which is the first through fifth vertebrae bones, the bottommost portion of the spinal column. They said, my baby's got a secret. The next paragraph. The word secret comes from the secretion, because this secretion is a secret, and the sacrum is a sacred part of the secret as the secretion pours down the spinal cord and reaches the sacrum. The germinated sacred oil ascends the spinal column. The seed germinated sacred oil then needs to return whence it came in the seed germinated sacred oil then needs to return whence it came in the midbrain. As the oil ascends the spinal cord, the vibration of the sacred oil of the Christ increases. It can upraise the spinal column or shushuma to increase your vibrations to the utmost of all you can have. You must then be in a pure state of love. You can hold this vibrational alignment to be in your utmost love state, so to be able to let your fluid ascend to your crown, to be in contact and alignment with your higher self, to descend into a whole new state of being. You do not need to refrain from a sexual agreement as long as it is pure love and not a sexual agreement only. The Kundalini raises at its peak, and then the oil can ascend without an orgasm. By transmuting the seed, the germinated sacred oil rises back up the spinal column till it eventually reaches the medulla oblongata, located in the brainstem, anterior and partially inferior to the cerebellum. It is a cone-shaped neuronal mass responsible for all autonomic involuntary functions, ranging from vomiting to sneezing. The medulla contains the cardiac, respiratory, vomiting, and vasomotor centers, and therefore deals with the autonomic functions of breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Via the midbrain, the sacred oil crosses the vagus nerve, the pneumogastric nerve, which descends from the brain area from the pineal and pituitary glands, respectively, which feed the lungs and the stomach. I'm going to repeat that. Via the midbrain, the sacred oil crosses the vagus nerve, which is also known as the pneumogastric nerve, which descends from the brain area, from the pineal and pituitary glands, respectively, which feeds the lung and stomach. This network of nerves is called the tree of life. The ancients knew that this seed is born in Bethlehem. Once a month is the Christ. They also knew that if one were to abstain from sex during that period, both the oil and the seed would be saved and would rise, burst through the heart chakra and throat chakra. At the very bottom of the spine, the oil has a very low vibratory rate. However, with proper practices, meditation, breathing, yoga, breathing, stretching, good eating, and the good peaceful behavior, the sacred oil would arrive at the medulla oblongata with its higher vibration. In other words, raise the Christ within. As the sacred oil crosses the vagus nerve at the top of the 33 vertebrae of the spinal column, which corresponds to the 33-year lifespan of the Christ. The crucifixion of the sacred oil. The final 31, 32, and numbers 31, 32, and 33 vertebrae at the back of the neck leading into the midbrain corresponds to final stages of the lifespan of the Christ, who is crucified at 33 years of age and then ascends. In other words, one is able to raise the Christ within ascension. Raise the Christ within to ascension. When the sacred oil arrives at the very top, they're awaiting its optics element when it crosses this 𝑓 gastric nerves. This is known as the crucifixion. Let me read that again. When the sacred oil arrives at the very top, they're awaiting is the optics element. When it crosses this 𝑓 gastric nerves, this is known as the crucifixion. The death of the sacred oil. The sacred oil is not killed and destroyed, but it is magnified 1,000-fold. The sacred oil is not killed and destroyed, but it is magnified 1,000-fold. The sacred oil then touches the optic thalamus and for 2.5 days remains in a condition that is called the dead, as it is considered to be dead. It only means ego death out of duality. I will repeat that. The death of the sacred oil. The sacred oil is not killed and destroyed, but it is magnified 1,000-fold. The sacred oil then touches the optic thalamus and for 2.5 days remains in a condition that is called the dead, as it is considered to be dead. It only means ego death out of duality. I was just going to put in my 2 cents about the Egyptians considered, when they considered someone to be dead, they considered somebody spiritually asleep. That's what dead meant and means to the Egyptians. Spiritually asleep, which is exactly what they're talking about here. Awakening the Christ within. The sacred oil then reaches the pineal gland after 2.5 days via the cerebrum, also known as the Golgotha, and illuminates the optic thalamus, known as the light of the world by the Egyptians and the Greeks. As the optic thalamus lights up, millions of brain cells that were once dormant now awaken, hence awakening the Christ within. Now, what's crazy is, but it's not crazy at all. It's alignment. As soon as I finished that and I took that deep breath, I looked up at the time. I said 12:25. All of the ascended masters, Buddha, Krishna, Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Yeshua, and an array of other ascended masters. They have similar characteristics because these are archetypes. These are models for you to follow. Jesus said, follow him, not worship him. You know, for those who resonate with Christ being in the flesh, Christ is consciousness that I read just about. And in my last video, I was telling my viewer that about 3 or 4 years ago, when I lived in DeKalb County, Easter Sunday, they told me, my guys, the divine told me, he is risen, and so too are you, child. I have come, and then Christ consciousness, the guides carrying Christ consciousness told me, there is no difference between you and I. The divine told me this. There is no difference between you and I. No, there is no separation between you and I. And I have come again to remind you of this truth. There is no separation between you and I, and have come again to remind you of this truth. We are God in the physical flesh. Now, people at different levels of consciousness may disagree or agree, but like I tell you in any one of my videos, do your own research, do your own, have your own process, do your own research, do your own homework, make your own notes, pick sense from nonsense. Check out my other video. This is part 2 to the video, the secret, right, the sacred Christ oil, the second coming of Christ. the first video is about Goddess Ishtar Inanna. Just some wisdom for Easter. I hope everybody enjoyed the weekend. You guys be well. See you next video.